the New York Mets in the midst of MLB's chaos as we welcome you into another edition of the Bleav in the Mets podcast. Chris Schubert, Jack McKessie here with you, and we are going to attempt on today's show, and there are no promises for what this show is going to be, but we are going to attempt to walk through all of the different scenarios of how the New York Mets could potentially play over the next 5 days, what the pitching matchups could potentially look like, the strategy, the game theory of what the next 4 days are going to look like for this team, and we will preview the Brewers series as well. But like I said, welcome in to episode number 6 of the Bleav in the Mets podcast. And today's episode brought to you by BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in our $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200K. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Bet online, the game starts here. And Jack, we are going to start, and I did not tell you this ahead of time, but we are going to allow ourselves 5 minutes, and I have the timer up here so I can see how long we go. I'm going to give us 5 minutes where we can rant and rave about the just lack of decision-making process for Major League Baseball over the last couple of days. But it's 5 minutes. I'm going to hold you to it. There's no filibustering here. 5 minutes for us to go in on MLB and the Atlanta Braves for what was just a disaster last couple of days in terms of everybody saw what the weather radar looked like. Everybody saw what this forecast looked like. And to only get one of these 3 games in is malpractice by everybody involved. And the Mets have nothing to do with this. The Braves are the home team. They control how this goes. And Major League Baseball can step in over the top and they can say, nope, we're doing it this way. And just completely botched to a point where we're playing a doubleheader on Monday, and I don't see a world where it's not going to matter, at least in some capacity.
It just doesn't make any sense. I felt like this was the worst possible scenario for both teams, right? Because you're playing a potential doubleheader on the day before the wild card series is supposed to start, which means that both teams are burning a starting pitcher, maybe only one, but regardless, they're both burning through their bullpen unless they get 2 complete games from their starters. But then that also affects your wild card match the day before you're supposed to travel for your wild card. On top of that, because they didn't get this figured out beforehand, there's a chance that the Mets just went to Atlanta and then went to Milwaukee to face the Brewers this as the regular season, what was supposed to be the regular season finale. Then they could go back to Atlanta for a doubleheader. And then depending on how things shake out, which we'll get to in a sec, they might end up back in Milwaukee for the wild card series. So you really just screw over both teams here because, again, the forecast for over a week was there's this tropical storm that looks like a hurricane coming towards the southeast U.S. Instead of making any decisions to make postponements or change the schedule around, the MLB just let things shake out how they were originally scheduled. And now we're stuck with this mess where there's a chance that the doubleheader means everything for both teams, and they have to play essentially playoff games right before they play an actual playoff series in the wild card.
I think the worst case scenario from Major League Baseball's perspective is that the series only matters for one team that's playing in the 2 games, but means everything for the Arizona Diamondbacks who will be sitting at home.
Right.
That is a competitive nightmare for MLB to put these teams in this spot because, listen, Jack, and again, I said at the intro, this is chaotic. This entire show is going to be chaotic as we try to put together all of these scenarios. But there is a scenario where the Mets go into Monday's doubleheader already having clinched their spot, and the Braves and Diamondbacks are battling it out for that last spot. So there's a world where the games mean everything to the Braves. They mean nothing to the Mets. The Mets are going to want to preserve the health and the arms of everybody involved, but yet the Mets winning means everything to the Diamondbacks. How could MLB put this potential scenario out there? And for everyone who would be say, well, that's only one of the possibilities. Yeah, well, guess what? I saw how Major League Baseball just recently handled a set of outcomes, and they picked the worst one. So that's more than likely what's going to happen here. I don't understand. I know they played on Sunday Night Baseball on Monday, and I know it was it would have been the less preferred outcome for everybody involved. But you can't convince me that a better solution, knowing what we know now and knowing what we knew at the time, on Sunday we were having this conversation, last weekend we were having this conversation, how we didn't get to a place where these 2 teams had a common off day on Monday. The Mets flew to Atlanta after the game Sunday night. They couldn't play a night game on Monday and then play a doubleheader on Tuesday or play a afternoon game on Wednesday and get these 3 games in. I get it. You have to, it's not ideal. You'd have to move pitchers around. You have to move pitchers up. Well, guess what? That's better than this. That's better than a doubleheader on Monday just because of the competitive nature of it. But Jack, you mentioned needing to go from Atlanta to Milwaukee, back to Atlanta, back to Milwaukee. There is a very realistic possibility that the New York Mets could go from Atlanta to Milwaukee, back to Atlanta, to San Diego, play 4 games in 3 days in 3 different time zones.
Yeah, I
It's
didn't even think
absurd.
about that.
Absurd. They could have to play in Milwaukee on Sunday, play the doubleheader on Atlanta on Monday, and then play in San Diego Tuesday night to start the wild card series.
I think another thing that just doesn't make any sense to me is if you're willing to have a doubleheader be a possible solution, like, Monday aside with the common off day, they already screwed up that decision. So if nothing happened then, but then they see the weather forecast, they're like, all right, maybe we need to shift things to make a doubleheader on Tuesday. At least then you're getting in 2 games that ultimately could determine, if things swung Atlanta's way, could determine who wins the in division head-to-head series. But instead, they let 1 game happen. It goes to the team that has the disadvantage right now in terms of record. And now you have 2 games that would have meant everything to both teams being pushed to Monday, when, again, we don't know if it's going to matter to both teams, if it's going to matter to either team, if it's only going to matter to the Mets, or rather the Braves. It's a total mess. And again, they just picked the worst possible scenario because there's no way this turns out well.
Yeah, and the important thing is that there is, again, a real likely scenario where just the first game matters. And that was even more reason to make sure you got 2 games in ahead of
Right.
this storm coming into town. It's why only getting 1 in was such a disaster on everybody's part. And I'm sorry, listen, I have no love for the Braves and their fans, and I want them to lose every game they play. But I get it. You're concerned about the gate. You're concerned about the money. You're telling me we couldn't come up with a financial solution to make this work? You're telling me that if we went and played these games in Texas, or we played these games in Cincinnati, I'm just picking areas that are close that they could have potentially used as a ballpark. Like, you're telling me that none of these places, all of these close stadiums that would have been out of the radius of this storm, were completely unavailable to MLB for 3 days or for 2 days? Like, again, not feasible. It's just MLB gets these things wrong all the time. And in the most important spot of the year, they got it wrong again. Okay, I Bleav we hit the 5-minute mark there, so we're not going to go any further. We're now going to discuss what this means, because despite how upset I am at the way MLB handled this, and how upset I am about how this could play out for the New York Mets, if it does play out in all those weird scenarios, it means the New York Mets made the playoffs. I'll get over it pretty quickly, right? I'll be fine, because the Mets will be playing in a playoff series. What becomes fun about this, and I actually think this is cool, and you and I have been texting a lot over the last 24 hours trying to war game this out. We do the thing you're not supposed to do in podcasting. We did the show before the show. We've been doing it for the last day and a half.
Yeah.
But to me, the fun part is the game theory of what each of these teams is going to do over the next couple of days. And so what we're going to try to do here on this show is look at this from the Mets perspective. We know a little bit about what the Braves are going to do. We know that Chris Sale is not going to start on Friday. They're going to go to Max Fried instead, and they're leaving Saturday and Sunday to be announced. And I think that is the biggest giveaway that you can have, that if they win that game, you're not going to see Chris Sale on Saturday. They are going to try to thread this needle of having Chris Sale ready if they need him in a must-win scenario, but they would like to thread the needle where they can have him for game 1 of the wild card series. That is what they are trying to do here. Will they be able to pull it off? Depends on how they play against the Kansas City Royals, and it's how the Mets play against the Brewers. Let's talk about this from the Mets perspective, because there's the one thing we do know is Carlos Mendoza said Sean Manaea is going to start on Friday. And I think the launching off point that we can have here, Jack, is, do we think that is the right decision for this team right now as we stand going into this Milwaukee series?
I think absolutely, because I'm not sure. I have all of the scenarios listed out in front of me, but I didn't do all of the math perfectly out. But I'm pretty sure that this Brewers series means a lot more for the Mets than the Royals series does for the Braves in terms of their magic number and scenarios where they can clinch. There are more possibilities if the Mets win more games. Like, even if the Braves sweep, I think there are some scenarios where they'll still need the doubleheader to determine. If the Mets win 2 or 3 games against the Brewers, their odds of making the playoffs and clinching a spot go way up. So, having as we've called him in the last 5 episodes, ace, pitch in the first game of the series. That means so much for the Mets. Is, I think, just the right call. You also leave him available for a possible game 2 if the Mets do end up making the wild card, which again is another crucial series. I'm interested to see what the rotation looks like after Manaea, because I'm pretty sure they're both still TBD on Saturday and Sunday for the Mets as well. But regardless, I think having Manaea go now or rather on Friday, and having him ready for a potential game 2 in the wild card it's the only decision that the Mets can make right now.
Look, both wild card races are down to 4 teams for these spots, right? And so we know that the Padres and Orioles are in on their respective sides. So it's 3 teams for 2 spots. It's the Royals, Tigers, and Twins on the American League side, and it is the Mets, Diamondbacks, and Braves on the National League side. And for the Royals, it certainly appears as if they are trending in the right direction to be able to lock this up. I think their magic number is down to 2 as we are recording this episode. Now, right now, as it stands, they would play Baltimore. If they fall to the 3 seed and they flip-flop with either Detroit or Minnesota, they then go to what I Bleav is going to be Houston, because they will play the worst division winner. So that would be Houston.
Correct.
So it's a question of how much does Kansas City want to avoid Houston, or do they want to set up their rotation correctly, right? Like that's the internal. Now, they have to clinch first, right? They need that little Z next to their name. But after that, which it should come in the next day or two, they then need to decide, are we going to potentially, I don't want to say forfeit, but give up our ability to play the Orioles instead of the Astros so that our rotation is the way we want it for a matchup with the Astros? Or are we going to go full steam ahead against the Braves to solidify ourselves as the 2 seed to make sure we face the Orioles? That's going to be the question that they have. Now, on the Mets side of things, we all know the permutations. The magic number is 4. They need some combination over the next couple of days before Monday. If you want to clinch before Monday, they need 4 Mets wins or Braves losses, any combination of that over the next 6 outcomes, the 3 Braves games and the 3 Mets games. They got to find 4 of either a Mets win or a Braves loss. So it would require a Mets sweep and 1 Braves loss, a combination of 2 and 2, a Mets win and the Braves getting swept. That's it. Those are the outcomes for us to get to a place where Monday does not matter for the New York Mets. Do you see how it gets a little difficult for Monday not to matter for the New York Mets and why we were so upset at the beginning of the show? Again, there are more outcomes here where Monday matters. Now, when it comes to what the Mets have done here with Sean Manaea, I agree 100%. He needed to be the starter here for a couple of reasons. They need a win, right? They need to wash the bad taste of their mouth of what happened on Tuesday in Atlanta. Yeah. And they still control everything here. Despite what the Braves did on Tuesday and making us all have flashbacks to 2022, if the Mets take 2 out of 3 from Milwaukee over the weekend, they are in full control of this. They are still in full control of what happens in this series. And I think you have to put your best pitcher out there, because it would then line him up to start game 1 of the wildcard series. You would be totally fine with him being able to come back in that series, right? Because he would pitch Friday, so Saturday, Sunday, Monday. It'd be 4 days, so he probably would pitch game 2. So you're pitching him in a spot which would make him available again for you in the 3-game series. And guess what? You need him in that 3-game series. Yep. So you need the game on Friday. You want to have Manaea available for the wildcard series. This is the perfect way to do both. There is not a needle that the Mets could thread to have Manaea available for that Brave series and then also have him available in the wild card series. So this, to me, is the best option. You take a game we have to have, a game in which Lindor's going to return to the lineup. He was in the lineup scheduled for Wednesday. They're going to have their ace on the mound. We know that the Brewers are not trying. They're locked in. No starters going past 5 innings, right? It is set up for the Mets to be able to win that game on Friday night, and the Mets need to have it to start shrinking that magic number. And so to me, that is no doubt slam dunk the right choice. It's what you do after where things get interesting. And unfortunately, and this is where I think because of the trust I have in David Stearns and Jeremy Hefner and Carlos Mendoza and the rotation as a whole, I think that group's going to come together and make the right decision, because I think there's probably a whiteboard. I'm pointing to my whiteboard in my office right now. There's a whiteboard that probably has all of the permutations we're about to discuss, because I think it's, okay, if we win with Manaea on the mound, we're going to do this in game 2. If we lose with Manaea, it's going to be this person for the game 2 of the Brewer series. And then you get to that game and it's okay. If we win this game, then we're going to do this. If we lose this game, we're going to. And so I don't think anybody knows who's starting on Saturday. I think we know what the options are, but I don't think there's anybody who knows who's starting on Saturday for the Mets.
And not just, if Mania wins, then this. If Mania loses, then this. It's also if Mania wins and the Padres win, then this. If Mania wins and the Diamondbacks win, then this. Or if he loses and, vice versa through all those. There are so many combinations that are going to affect things from every single series going on at the same time between the Mets and the Brewers, the Diamondbacks and the Padres, and the Braves and the Royals.
Because, again, not to cut you off because I want to let you kind of go through all these scenarios, but the magic number for the Mets, the lowest magic number is 4 with the Braves, but it's 5 with the Diamondbacks. So since there are 2 spots up there, there's 2 different permutations for this. So if, let's say, the Braves win on Friday and the Mets win, well, the Mets shrink their magic number to 3 over the Braves. But if the Padres beat the Diamondbacks, now the magic number for the Mets and the Diamondbacks also should shrink to 3. And so then it should be 3 across the board. And so now that opens up another avenue for Monday not to matter. Again, can you see how chaotic and confusing this can get? And so I think you kind of have to work backwards, right? You have to look at who started in Atlanta, which was Luis Severino. And then you have to, I think, work backwards for the next 4 days. And to me, I think there's a legitimate argument to be made that you want to have Sevy be one of the starters on Monday if those games matter. But we don't know if they're going to matter yet. So you need to toy with the idea, because I hadn't even thought of this scenario until just a second, Jack. Let's say you win the first 2 against the Brewers.
Right.
The Braves lose one of the first 2 against the Royals. You got to throw Sevy on Sunday to just end it against the Brewers, right? And unfortunately rule him out for the doubleheader and probably rule him out for the wild card series, because you just got to go for clinching the spot, because you win, you're in. Let me put my best available pitcher on the mound in that spot. But if there isn't an opportunity to clinch it with a Mets victory, maybe you hold Sevy back for Monday, since you're going to lose him regardless. He's not going to be available under any circumstance. I hate this. I hate everything about this.
It's crazy. My mind has been like, I feel like I needed a limitless pill to just figure out every single permutation, because there are so many possibilities. I wasn't even paying attention just to the possible results of these 3 massive series that I mentioned earlier. I was also looking at, okay, which teams coming into those series have something to play for. And so I think that's what I'm just going to start with right now is you mentioned the Tigers won today, the Royals won today to finish a sweep of the Nats. So they're hot going into Atlanta. So both of their magic numbers are down to 2. The Twins play the Marlins tonight in a series finale. If the Twins win, the magic number for both the Royals and the Tigers, I'm just going to forget the Tigers for now because they don't really matter for us. If the Twins win, the Royals magic number stays at 2 and gives them work to do against the Braves. Even if the Twins lose, though, the Royals lose their tiebreaker to the Twins, and so they still need to win at least 1 game against the Braves, which gives them something to play for in that series regardless. Okay, so that's what the Royal situation is. Then we look at the Dodgers and the Padres game that happens tonight, which is Thursday. The Dodgers magic number for the NL West going into tonight is 2. If they win this game tonight, they won the NL West and they're locked into their bye. If the Padres win, the Dodgers magic number stays at 2, and the Padres go into Arizona with the chance still to win the NL West if they win out and the Dodgers lose out. Now, if the Dodgers win, the Padres can't play for the division title, but they still need to win 1 game against Arizona to make sure that they can clinch the home field advantage in the wild card game. So regardless of what happens in the Dodgers and Padres series tonight, the Padres at least have 1 win that they need to secure in Arizona.
Well, and there's an interesting wrinkle to that series in particular, because you may think to yourself, well, the Padres winning, great, because then they have something to play for. They can try to win the division. They're going to want to take it to the Diamondbacks. Well, the Diamondbacks don't have a spot locked up either. So even if the Padres lose, guess what? The Mets move a half game closer to the Padres for that top spot, which could matter, because in a world where the Mets can take care of business this weekend and they pass everybody and they then get to go home instead of traveling, that takes the travel nightmare scenario that we outlined completely off the table. So again, there are it feels like the meme where the numbers are just all around the guy's head. That's how I feel trying to figure this out, because I'm trying to write down the teams I'm supposed to root for tonight. And I have the Twins, the Padres. Shout out to the Orioles. We probably want them to win as well.
Yeah.
To make sure that there's potentially something that could matter for the Orioles when they play the Twins. So that means the Royals have something to play for. So I have them written down as well. Twins, Padres, Orioles.
Yeah. And so another thing coming into this weekend was, and I was paying attention to this yesterday, the Brewers needed specific things to happen yesterday, as in Wednesday, to be locked into their number 3 seed and have essentially nothing to play for when the Mets come to town. All of it happened last night. The Phillies beat the Cubs, the Dodgers beat the Padres, and the Brewers lost to the Pirates. So now the Brewers are locked into the 3 seed. They have nothing to play for, essentially, because no matter what happens, they're in the 3 seed. They're going to play whoever the 6 seed is in the wild card. Okay, deep breath. Now, when the Mets go into Milwaukee, here are the possible scenarios for them to clinch. Okay.
So remember, what we just gave to you is only your rooting interest for Thursday evening. You need to then just completely, like in Men in Black, where they hit you with the little whatever it's called. You have to just reset your brain. We're going to root for new teams on Friday.
Right. And on Friday, you're consistently rooting for, from Friday through Sunday, you're consistently rooting for the Padres, and you're rooting for the Royals. We want the Diamondbacks and the Braves to lose as many games as possible because it makes everything easier for the Mets. It lowers their magic number down. And unless you really want the Mets to have home field, then you want the Diamondbacks. I'm not going to bother with that right now. I'm focusing on the Mets Brewers series. We're a Mets podcast. We're going to go with the Mets Brewers outcomes. All right. First of all, if the Mets win only one game against Milwaukee, they can still clinch a wild card spot if the Padres sweep. In that situation, yes, Chris.
Sorry, I just want to make something very clear for the audience. You are saying this to say they can clinch before Monday, because
Correct.
This is not, if the Mets don't do this, they're eliminated. It takes, if these things happen, it takes Monday off the table in terms of importance. Monday could still be important if these things don't happen, but to take Monday completely out of the equation, it is a stress-free day for the New York Mets. These are the things that have to happen.
And also to clarify, these situations are possible that the Mets clinch and the Diamondbacks and Braves care about what happens in the Mets Braves doubleheader on Monday.
Correct.
This is madness. This is I cannot believe MLB did this. We got the rant out of the way. Okay. These are all scenarios in which the Mets clinch before Monday and they don't have anything on the line, even if they play on Monday.
Potentially seeding, but for the sake of this podcast, it doesn't matter.
Just a spot, a playoff spot. Again, if they win only one game against the Brewers, they still clinch a spot before Monday if the Padres sweep the Diamondbacks in Arizona. Okay. If they win the series against Milwaukee, that's 2 games, and they lose one, they can still clinch if the Padres win their series or sweep the Diamondbacks, or if the Royals sweep the Braves. So 2 wins against the Brewers means that we need a Padres series win or a Royals sweep.
Wait a minute. The magic number is 4, right?
Yes.
So wouldn't a Royals, and this is going to give the perfect example of why this is stupid. You have on our sheet here where we have all of these things listed out. You have 1 win versus Milwaukee and a Padres sweep, the Mets clinch. I'd like to add something to that. A Royals sweep and 1 Mets win would be 4. That would also get the Mets a spot.
I want to say the Mets magic number over the Braves is 5, and the Mets magic number over the Diamondbacks is 4.
No, that would change everything for me. That would change all of these permutations that I've been doing. No, because we've been talking about the Mets taking 2 out of 3 from the Braves, and that would do it. So that means it would be 4.
Yes, but the 2 out of 3 from the Braves means that the Mets would also get the tiebreaker over the Braves. But if they don't get the tiebreaker,
we're not playing those games. MLB. I hate you. I hate you for doing this.
It is ridiculous. So again, we're rooting for the Padres because their series matters more to the Mets because their magic number is lower against the Diamondbacks than it is for the Braves. So if the Padres win the series, as in they only win 2 games, the Mets only need to win 2 games over Milwaukee. If the Padres sweep, the Mets only need to win 1 game over Milwaukee. Or the Mets can win 2 games over Milwaukee and the Royals sweep the Braves, so the Braves win 0 out of 3 games, and the Mets would clinch over the Braves and have a seeding, situation to figure out with the Diamondbacks. Finally, if the Mets sweep Milwaukee, this is the best case scenario. The Mets have clinched a playoff spot no matter what, unless the Diamondbacks sweep the Padres and the Braves win at least 2 against the Royals. So again, if the Mets win all 3 games against the Brewers, aka best case scenario, again, Brewers have nothing to play for. If they win 3 games, that lowers their magic number against the Diamondbacks to 1 and their magic number against the Braves to 2, which means if the only way that both teams can still be alive mathematically is if the Diamondbacks sweep and the Braves win the series.
Again, MLB is not going to get what they wish for here. Monday's going to matter in some capacity. We just
Yes.
heard all of the scenarios. The Mets winning 2 out of 3, which is probably the thing that we would set on the table as the expectation for this team of what they need to do.
Yes.
That requires a lot of help. It requires the Padres to take 2 out of 3 from the Diamondbacks. It requires the Royals to sweep the Braves. So even in that scenario, the Mets still are going to have to play on Monday with something of importance, with everything on the line. So that is what we have been trying to outline here on the show today, is all of these different scenarios. It requires the Mets to play really good baseball like they have been for the entirety of the second half. It requires them to continue to do that this weekend, but it also requires a little bit of help, which is why, despite us going through all of that, the message that I have is we will transition into previewing this series, although I don't know what to preview because I don't know who's pitching,
Right.
is the Mets just have to focus on their side of the equation.
Yes.
They just need to go out and play baseball, which is why pitching Sean Manaea on Friday is such the smart, savvy play. Because guess what? The Mets go out on Friday and they win the way we think they're going to with their ace on the mound. They've done it more often than not. That starts, we've been using this analogy on the show a lot, that starts the snowball down the hill for the Mets to be able to start looking at all of these things.
Yes.
And for us to be able to really start the scoreboard watch here. So let's transition into this Brewer series, because it has now all of a sudden become the most important series since I've been born for the New York Mets, because of everything that's on the line. We do know the 3 pitchers for the Brewers. We do know that Frankie Montas is going to go on Friday night. We know Colin Rea is going to go on Saturday. And we know that Tobias Myers is going to go on Sunday. Here's the other little wrinkle for you. The Brewers are not going to throw any of these guys more than 5 innings.
Yep.
They've said it out loud. They've said that this is what they're going to do. So you are going to get into the bullpens you're going to get into this bullpen very early. And so it is going to be up to the New York Mets to be able to get on these pitchers early so that they can then tack on those insurance runs against this bullpen. And you know what? Make this extremely uncompetitive for 3 days. That should be the goal for this team. 3 games where you just go out and this is extremely uncompetitive.
Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate, the best thing the Mets can do is not scoreboard watch at all, not have to rely on anything besides 2 very remote outcomes, and win these 3 games. And it makes everything far, far easier for themselves and for MLB. So looking ahead at this series against the Brewers, because the Brewers have nothing to play for, and because none of their starting pitchers are going more than 5 innings, which they have said, there's a chance that, these pitchers aren't taking these games super seriously. There's a chance that they're experimenting with some new pitches. There's a chance they're, trying to get some pitches that didn't work as well for them throughout the season going against the Mets. But the Mets are a team that throughout this stretch in the summer and September, they have proven that they can deal with any situation that they come up against, essentially, right? I have full faith in this offense to be able to handle anything weird or wonky, especially if they get to the bullpen early. Like, this is a lineup that is built very balanced and has a chance to do very well, do a lot of damage against the entire Brewers pitching staff throughout the weekend. And I fully expect them to do that because that's what they need to do. And so far, they've done pretty much everything they've needed to do down the stretch.
Yeah, the Mets are going to need to get back to their offensive ways where they scored 10 runs in 3 straight games. Not in terms of results, but in terms of process. You need that type of process over the next couple of days. Guess what? I think Sean Manaea going on Friday, plus Francisco Lindor being in the lineup, there's going to be a lot of juice in that clubhouse. Like, they're going to be amped and ready to go because they're going to understand, even more so than when they got to Atlanta, just how important this 3-game series is. And you know what? There was a lot of talk of the team for the first time all year on Tuesday looking like the pressure got to them. And there's no advanced number or analytic that I can provide to back this up. I think they're going to respond to that. I think they're going to respond to not meeting that moment. And because they have so many times in the past, I Bleav in that room to be able to look at each other and say, we got to be better. Like, we are better. We've got to be better. And so I Bleav you are going to see from the get-go a truly inspired effort on Friday. Now, if you don't, we're going to have some conversations, but I think you are going to see a massive effort from this team on Friday to make sure they get one right out of the way.
And you don't even have to go that far back to look at, seeing how this team has bounced back from adversity. That first series of, 2 out of 3 against the Phillies, where they dropped those 2 heartbreaking losses to end the series after leading in all 3 games. They bounce back and they sweep the Nationals, right? They take care of business in what could have been a trap series with the Phillies again ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And then Game 1 against the Phillies, that big win, that third game in a row, they score 10 runs. And then they get blown out in game 2. And then they bounce back with 2 more crucial wins, including one against Zach Wheeler, who, again, is one of the best pitchers in baseball, in game 4 to keep their wild card lead ahead going into Atlanta. And so, again, you don't have to look very far back to see this is a team that has bounced back from adversity. So it should give you full faith that even though, yes, that game against Atlanta was one of their sloppiest in months, you have to have faith that they're going to bounce back because they've just shown you that they can do it twice.
Yeah, and listen, you have to worry about Jackson Churio. You have to worry about Rhys Hoskins because he's going to want to do something against the Mets. Just he on his own is going to want to destroy the New York Mets because that's
he's hot too recently.
That's just who his thing. That's just who he is. That's just what his thing has become here. He's one of those Met killers, and so those are the two guys you pay attention to in this lineup. Again, it's hard to preview the series because I don't know who's pitching for the Mets. I can't talk about Jose Quintana using his curveball more and to attack Jackson. I can't talk about those things because I don't know who's pitching. Right? You would like to see David Peterson probably make a start here to bounce back over his last performance. You'd probably like to see Jose Quintana, who's been the best pitcher. I know Sean Manaea is the ace, but over the last 4 or 5 starts, Jose Quintana has been the best pitcher on the New York Mets. He's got a sub 0.5 ERA over his last 5 starts. So get that guy out there. Like I know it's Jose Quintana, and we probably are going to watch like through our hands, but he's been the best pitcher for the New York Mets the last 5 times through the rotation. I'd like that guy out there in the most important series of the year. But guess what? I don't know what this team's going to do. I just don't.
And I also
on Friday, and that's it. We just figure it out as the days go on.
And I also have no idea what the Brewers are going to do in terms of their lineup. Like, are they going to rest some of their guys in anticipation of their series starting on Tuesday against whoever? Like, are they going to, do more of a platoon or have more of their bench guys playing in the starting lineup just because they don't want to have injuries to guys like Willy Adames, who's one of the most underrated hitters in MLB? William Contreras, will they have Gary Sanchez play catcher instead of him so he gets a little bit more rest? I don't know what that's going to look like at all until we get to this weekend.
Somehow we fit all this in the time frame that I wanted us to fit it all in. I didn't want us to confuse the listeners, and hopefully the listeners weren't confused as we attempt to go through all of this game theory that the Mets are going to play over the next couple of days. And again, the big takeaway that I think we want to leave for this podcast is it's going to be weird over the next couple of days. The Mets just have to go out and win baseball games. If the Mets go out and win baseball games, they are going to, with each win that they get over the next 3 days of this Brewer series, the less and less important Monday becomes. And that should be the goal not because it's going back to Truist and it's going back to Atlanta and House of Horrors. It's not about that. It's because of the travel that requires, no matter where it was, because the travel that the next couple of days are going to require, putting that day in a position where the Mets can basically, at least one of the games, say, we're putting an opener out there. Good luck. We don't care what the score is. That's where the Mets should want to be. That's the place that this team should try to put themselves in. And it's going to require, I don't want to call it a Herculean effort because this team has done this all throughout the year, but it's going to require them to win this series at a minimum. That's what they have to do, because if they don't, then Monday all of a sudden becomes even more important. And you just turn the dial up to 100 because it is going to mean everything to this team. So we're going to be here along the journey. If for whatever reason it is possible the Mets clinch on Saturday after the first 2 days of this series, there will be an emergency celebratory Mets make the playoffs version of this podcast. It's unlikely. It requires the Mets to win both and the Padres to win the first 2 against the Diamondbacks. It's not unlikely, but that's what it's going to require for us to have that celebratory podcast. So if we have that, you'll hear it late Saturday night, early Sunday morning. I promise you, we will record that evening and you will see that podcast. But more than likely, you're going to get a very, very scared version of this show Monday morning after the Brewer series, previewing what is going to be the worst 7 hours of our lives as baseball fans, watching those 2 games against the Braves. That's what it boils down to. And you know what? Considering where I thought this team was going to be at the beginning of the year, I'd have it no other way.
I mean, listen, we thought the Braves series was going to be the most important series of the year. Things have changed, and now it's the Brewers series. The Mets just need to go out and take care of their business. If they win 2, they're in a good spot. If they win 3, they're in an even better spot. And look, they could win 1, get some help, but what matters for the Mets, they don't fully control their own destiny. But as long as they go out and take care of business, like you said, they minimize the importance of Monday, and that is exactly what their goal should be for this weekend.
Well, Mets fans, try to enjoy it, because it's not often that we have been given a team that has given us this much to root for in this part of the season. And we don't get opportunities like this very often. And I know it's going to be stressful. And I know all of us at this point want to see this team cross the finish line, right? It would be a massive disappointment for this team to not cross the finish line. I think they will, but I am here to say, enjoy this ride. Enjoy the next couple of days, because it is days like this that are proof that you have a winning franchise, that you have a franchise that is going in the right direction. So again, I know we all want this team to make the playoffs, but enjoy what the next 4 days of baseball are going to provide, because it's going to be stressful. It's going to be drama, but it is also going to be, at least in my opinion, a lot of fun. So that's going to do it for us here on this edition of Bleav in the Mets. Hopefully we didn't confuse you too much. Hopefully we gave you all the outcomes and all of the potential permutations of what could potentially happen here over the weekend. And as always, and probably the most important one of the year, let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets.